They'll call you strong. They'll admire your work ethic, your discipline, your drive. They'll say, "I don't know how you do it all." But what they don't see is what it's costing you. Because sometimes, what looks like strength is just someone collapsing silently. You answer emails at midnight. You wake up tired, already behind. You wear productivity like armor, hoping it hides the numbness. And the worst part? They applaud you for it. Burnout has become a trophy, but it's not a badge of honor. It's a cry for help that no one hears. In a culture obsessed with hustle, we've learned to hide our breakdowns behind checklists, to normalize chronic stress as just part of the grind, to confuse collapse with commitment. But this isn't resilience. It's emotional erosion disguised as success. You're not weak. You're overworked. You're not lazy. You're running on fumes. And still, you feel guilty for slowing down. You wonder if you're just being dramatic. You're not. This video is not about pushing harder. It's about stopping long enough to notice. You're bleeding energy into an identity that was never yours to carry. We'll unpack the real psychology behind burnout, why we praise it, why we hide it, and how to finally escape it without losing yourself in the process. Because you're not alone in this, and you're not broken. But something in this system is, and it's time we call it out. If any part of you whispered yes, while watching this, stay. You don't need to suffer just to feel worthy. Let's start telling the truth about burnout and rewrite what it really means to be strong. Strength has a look. It's tidy, sharp, efficient. It shows up early, stays late, and never complains. It gets labeled with things like inspiring or unstoppable. But what if that version of strength is just a costume? Let's be honest. A lot of us aren't strong. We're trained to perform strength, and we learned it young. We watched adults power through exhaustion. We were praised when we didn't cry. We were rewarded for not needing help. So we adapted. We turned our nervous breakdowns into to-do lists. We transformed our anxiety into overachievement. We wore exhaustion like it meant something good, like it proved we mattered. But underneath the clean calendar and the perfect posture, something's breaking, and no one can see it. Burnout isn't always dramatic. It often starts in silence. It's the little moments. Sitting in your parked car too long before going inside. Forgetting words mid-sentence because your brain feels fogged. Laughing at a joke you didn't even hear. It's emotional dissociation in disguise. It's grief for your own body. As it begs for rest, you're afraid to give it. And still, you keep showing up. You keep performing the role. Because if you slow down, what happens? Do you lose the identity people admire? Do you disappoint the version of you that's always been the strong one? Or worse, do you realize you don't even know who you are without the grind? This is the twisted genius of modern burnout. It convinces you that slowing down is failure, and overextending is noble. But let me tell you the truth. You are not noble for destroying yourself quietly. You are not successful if your body is collapsing under the weight of your image. You are not okay just because others think you are. Burnout wears the face of strength, but it's not strength. It's self-abandonment wrapped in achievement. You can't heal what you still feel pressured to perform. The moment you remove the mask, you don't become weaker, you become real. And that is where actual strength begins. Somewhere along the way, we stopped asking how we feel and started asking how much we got done. Productivity became the metric of our worth. Our value got tied to our output. And rest became guilt. In today's culture, being busy isn't just accepted, it's worshipped. "I've just been swamped lately" is worn like a badge of importance. If you have free time, it must mean you're not doing enough. If you're not doing enough, maybe you're not enough. So we double down. We overschedule. We answer emails at red lights. We eat lunch with one hand and reply to Slack messages with the other. We forget what stillness feels like, because silence threatens the illusion that we're in control. But underneath that constant motion is a truth we're terrified to face. We don't feel valuable when we stop. This isn't just burnout. It's a crisis of identity. The lie we've been fed is simple. Your worth is in your usefulness. Your rest must be earned. Your pace determines your place. And it shows up everywhere. At work, you feel replaceable unless you're always on. At home, you struggle to be present because your mind is still racing. Even in therapy, you measure progress by how quickly you fix yourself. But here's the truth. You were never meant to earn your right to exist. Your value doesn't spike when your calendar is full. It doesn't drop when you slow down. It doesn't disappear when you're quiet, tired, or healing. Real productivity, the kind that builds a meaningful life, isn't about how much you do. It's about how deeply you live. And you can't live deeply if you're always sprinting to stay afloat. Here's a moment from real life. Imagine a young mom in Minnesota. She wakes up at 5 a.m., makes breakfast, packs lunches, rushes to her remote job, crushes back-to-back meetings. But by 4 p.m., she's in tears folding laundry, feeling like she did nothing today. Because in her mind, productivity isn't just about doing. It's about proving. Proving she's strong, capable, worthy. But she is worthy. Even if no one sees her, even if she did less today. You are not a machine, and your life isn't a performance report. The moment you untangle your identity from your productivity is the moment you begin to recover your humanity. And that is the kind of success that doesn't collapse you. It begins subtly. You're amazing. You always get things done. You're the strong one. You smile, nod, absorb the praise. But over time, it becomes less like recognition and more like a role you're now required to play. Because once people see you as reliable, you can't afford to collapse. Once they admire your discipline, you can't afford to slow down. The praise becomes pressure, and the role becomes a prison. What no one tells you is this: burnout doesn't just come from doing too much. It comes from being unable to stop, because who you are depends on it. Dr. Christina Maslach, who pioneered burnout research at UC Berkeley, defines it as a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. But her findings reveal something deeper. It's not just exhaustion, it's emotional erosion. It's the depletion of empathy, identity, and connection. And often, it hides behind a smile. You keep delivering, you keep showing up. Not because you're thriving, but because you're terrified of what might happen if you don't. This is what makes burnout so insidious. It wears the mask of excellence. It's reinforced by compliments. And every time someone says, "I don't know how you do it," you silently wonder how much longer you can. You tell yourself you can't rest, that everything would fall apart if you stopped, that your worth is tied to your usefulness. But here's the paradox. Maslach highlights: the more you're praised for pushing through, the more invisible your suffering becomes. Your humanity gets replaced with performance. No one asks if the high performer is okay. They assume you're built for it, so you start assuming it too, until the exhaustion becomes your identity, and silence becomes your survival strategy. This isn't resilience, it's emotional suppression, and it's killing your nervous system from the inside out. Real strength is not about how long you endure the pressure. It's about recognizing when the pressure has become inhumane. Burnout is not weakness. It's a biological warning. Your body keeps the score, and the longer you fake it, the louder the collapse will be. So if the praise is hurting more than helping, step back, not to quit, but to reclaim the version of you that doesn't need to earn love by bleeding. I'm fine. It's the most rehearsed lie in modern life. You say it at work, with friends, in passing texts, even to yourself, in the mirror, when your eyes betray the truth. I'm fine is armor. It's the sentence you use when the truth feels too inconvenient, too messy, too real. But what if fine isn't a state of being? What if it's a survival script? Dr. Gail Parker, a clinical psychologist who spent decades studying trauma and emotional suppression, explains that when people say "I'm fine" while emotionally deteriorating, they are not lying, they're dissociating. In other words, they've become so practiced at detaching from their own needs, they no longer know how to tell the truth without shame. And that's the real cost. When you live in a world that doesn't know how to hold your pain, you learn to hide it. You become fluent in the language of emotional disguise. Smiling becomes automatic. Deflection becomes instinct. But the body remembers. Your nervous system knows what your mouth won't say. Your heart rate spikes before emails. Your stomach knots before meetings. Your sleep fragments. Your energy collapses. These aren't random symptoms. They're signals. And the longer you ignore them, the louder they get. Here's how this myth keeps spreading. Because you're still functioning, people assume you're okay. Because you're not crying, they assume you're coping. But functioning isn't flourishing, and silence isn't healing. Saying "I'm fine" becomes a ritual of emotional self-abandonment. You start fearing that if you ever dropped the act, you'd disappoint everyone, or worse, fall apart beyond repair. But what you need isn't another mask. What you need is permission to be seen without performance, to say I'm not fine without apologizing for it, because not being okay isn't a weakness, it's a signal, a healthy human response to sustained internal overload. Dr. Parker reminds us that self-care isn't indulgence, it's a form of resistance against emotional suppression. To pause, to breathe, to admit you're unraveling, isn't quitting, it's a sacred return to truth. So if you've been using I'm fine as a shield, ask yourself this. Who taught you that your pain needed to be invisible? Who told you that real strength is pretending? It's not. Real strength is telling the truth, even when your voice trembles, even when the world expects silence. It starts with 3 harder words. I need help. That's not a failure, that's a beginning. Burnout doesn't start with collapse. It starts with small compromises, micro-abandonments of self in favor of approval, tiny fractures that go unnoticed until the entire structure gives way. You tell yourself, it's just a busy season. I'll rest after this deadline. It's not that bad. But slowly, the cracks widen. Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, the psychologist who first coined the term burnout in 1974, didn't define it as laziness or fragility. He called it a state of mental and physical exhaustion caused by one's professional life. But what made his work so powerful was this insight. Burnout doesn't come from weakness. It comes from idealism. The people most at risk are not the lazy, but the ones who care too much, the overcommitted, the deeply responsible, the ones who believe their effort will always be enough to compensate for the imbalance. And that's where the slow erosion begins. You start skipping breaks to prove your dedication. You accept more work to avoid being seen as difficult. You push through exhaustion because you've tied your identity to being capable. You stop asking how you feel. You only ask, what else needs to be done? At first, people admire you. Your boss praises your work ethic. Your family says, you're holding everything together. And those words feel like fuel. But what they're really doing is encouraging your slow destruction. You begin to blur the line between sacrifice and self-destruction. You confuse silence for strength. You become proud of your ability to suffer without breaking, until you do. That's the paradox Freudenberger uncovered. Burnout often targets those who are most driven, most passionate, most committed to making things work, even when they're crumbling inside. And when the collapse finally comes, it doesn't always look like a breakdown. Sometimes it looks like numbness, disconnection, an inability to feel joy in anything. You wake up tired, no matter how long you sleep. You dread even small tasks. You withdraw from people you love. You feel like a ghost inside your own body. And yet, from the outside, you're still doing great. But burnout doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it whispers. And if you don't listen, it will eventually make you. The foundation starts to crack the moment you treat your body like a machine. The moment you forget you're not a resource, you're a person. So ask yourself honestly, where are you ignoring the fracture lines? Because the sooner you see them, the sooner you can stop the collapse. Your calendar may lie, but your body never does. Long before burnout appears on a performance review, it pulses through cramped shoulders, shallow breaths, and a heartbeat that refuses to settle. You can mute notifications, but you cannot mute biology. The body is both witness and whistleblower. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, renowned trauma researcher and author of The Body Keeps the Score, explains that chronic stress rewires the nervous system to treat daily life like an emergency. Your sympathetic branch, the fight-or-flight circuit, stays half-lit all day, dumping cortisol into your bloodstream like a faulty faucet. That chemistry feels normal until one morning it doesn't, and ordinary tasks provoke extraordinary fatigue. Think about the hidden cues. You forget simple words even though you slept 8 hours. You clench your jaw during emails you label quick. Your weekend relaxation leaves you more exhausted because your mind patrols unfinished checklists. These are not quirks, they are diagnostic lights on your dashboard. Ignoring them is like taping over the engine warning because the color offends you. Eventually, the engine wins. Science backs this up. A 2024 Stanford meta-analysis on overworking mental health found that employees reporting high productivity anxiety showed elevated inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein and IL-6, strong predictors of cardiovascular disease. Translation: hustle culture is not merely uncomfortable, it is biologically corrosive. But here's the hopeful twist. The same body that records stress can also record recovery. Neuroplasticity is real. The brain keeps editing itself based on experience. Provide new input, restorative sleep, intentional breath, genuine social support, and the wiring shifts. Cortisol falls, heart rate variability rises, prefrontal clarity returns. Burnout recovery is less a motivational speech and more a physiological recalibration. Start with micro-interruptions. 2-minute exits from the adrenaline loop. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold. Exhale for 6. Repeat 5 times. This simple vagus nerve exercise, championed by neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman, downshifts the system faster than scrolling could ever distract it. Do it before meetings, after arguments, or whenever your ribs feel like armor. Next, honor circadian intelligence. Lights dim by 10. Screens gone by 9. Deep sleep is when glial cells wash metabolic waste from the brain. Skip it and you wake up cognitively hungover, mistaking poison for personality. Reclaim movement, not as calorie punishment, but as nervous system hygiene. A 15-minute walk outside raises brain-derived neurotrophic factor, nature's own reset button. No gym membership can replace sunlight, fresh air, and the primal rhythm of footsteps. Finally, speak the unspeakable. Stress unshared grows fungal. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that verbalizing emotions in a safe space lowers amygdala activity and increases prefrontal regulation. In plain English, telling the truth calms the storm. So pause right now. Scan your body from crown to heel. Notice the tightness behind your eyes, the grinding in your lower back, the pulse in your temples. Each sensation is a sentence, part of a story your mouth has not dared to tell. Burnout isn't merely in your schedule. It is etched into muscle memory. You will not outwork it, you must outlisten it. When you learn to treat every ache as a message, not a malfunction, you begin a dialogue that can save your life. Turn this knowledge into ritual. Schedule breathwork like meetings, guard bedtime like revenue. Celebrate small pauses the way others celebrate overachievement. Momentum will follow biology. And in that quieter, steadier rhythm, you will remember that productivity was never the point. Presence is the ultimate unpaid dividend. For years, you were told that strength meant endurance, that saying yes made you reliable, that never needing help made you impressive, that setting boundaries was selfish, and so you gave more. You answered one more email. You said sure when you wanted to scream no. You blurred the line between your job and your identity, between your kindness and your exhaustion. But let's say it clearly now. Burnout is not the price of value, and boundaries are not weakness. They are the architecture of self-respect. Dr. Brené Brown, grounded in decades of research on vulnerability and emotional resilience, puts it plainly. The most compassionate people are also the most boundaried. She found that those who consistently show up for others without losing themselves are the ones who are clear about what is and isn't okay, not the ones who overextend, not the ones who abandon themselves for applause. You were taught that boundaries push people away, but the truth is, lack of boundaries invites resentment, and resentment poisons connection. So what does real strength look like? It looks like saying, I'm not available after 6 p.m. I need a weekend to myself. I'm not okay carrying this alone anymore. It looks like disappointing others sometimes, in order to not disappear into your own life. It looks like not being the hero, so you can be whole. This is where the redefinition begins. Strength is not in the silence of your suffering. It's in your ability to speak, to stop, to say, enough. Here's what boundaryless burnout sounds like in everyday America. A nurse in Ohio who skips lunch 5 days in a row and calls it just part of the job. A teacher in Texas grading at midnight with tears in her eyes, whispering, I love what I do, as if it explains her body breaking. A father in Brooklyn working 3 jobs who hasn't felt his breath slow in months, only the growing panic of still not doing enough. They are praised, respected, applauded for their sacrifice. But inside, they're fading, and we have to stop clapping for collapse. Strength, real strength, is about sustainability. It's about being able to show up tomorrow, not just survive today. It is strategic. It is deliberate. It is often quiet, invisible to those still trapped in the myth that hustle equals honor. And yes, at first, setting boundaries feels like rebellion. Because for people who've built their worth around compliance, saying no sounds violent. But it's not violence. It's liberation. The most dangerous burnout isn't the one that makes you fall apart. It's the one that makes you function on autopilot so long that you forget how to feel. And boundaries are the brakes that remind you to come home to yourself. So redefine it now. Strength isn't who keeps pushing the longest. It's who knows when to pause. It's who says, I matter too. It's who lives a life that doesn't require collapse to be considered meaningful. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify your limits. You only have to believe, deeply, that your well-being is not a luxury. It's the foundation of everything. You've been taught to collapse quietly, to recover in private, to hide the healing like it's shameful, to only re-emerge when you're polished, perfect, and ready to produce again. But what if recovery isn't a retreat from life? What if it's a full-scale revolution against everything that broke you? Because here's the truth most people won't say. You don't have to hit rock bottom to make a change. You don't need a breakdown to justify rest. You don't need permission to rebuild. You only need to decide, right now, not next week, not when the project ends, not when people finally understand. Now, because your life is happening now. And every day you postpone peace is another day stolen by systems that profit from your exhaustion. Recovery isn't weakness. It's intelligence. It's your nervous system begging for recalibration. It's your body whispering, please remember what it feels like to belong to yourself. And when you listen, you don't shrink. You expand. This isn't about quitting your job or moving to the woods. It's about waking up in the same life, but finally choosing to live it differently. Start with the smallest rebellion. Turn off your phone an hour earlier. Say no without explanation. Take a walk without multitasking. Tell the truth when someone asks how you are. These aren't acts of luxury. They're acts of self-rescue. Because you were never supposed to survive by burning out. You were meant to live fully, richly, slowly, without apologizing for your limits. And the world may not reward this at first. You might lose approval. You might confuse people used to your compliance. But what you gain is yourself, your clarity, your boundaries, your energy, your truth. Imagine waking up without dread. Imagine working from a place of flow, not fear. Imagine being proud of your pace instead of ashamed of it. That's not a fantasy. That's biology on your side. That's a life restructured from the inside out. The moment you begin honoring your exhaustion instead of judging it, the healing begins. The burnout doesn't win. The system doesn't swallow you whole. You get to write your own rhythm. You get to decide what strength looks like. And this time, it won't be silent collapse. It'll be conscious construction. Recovery is not a soft landing. It's a bold exit from everything that convinced you pain was the price of purpose. So breathe, stand, begin again. This is not the end of your story. It's the first chapter you wrote for you. And if you're waiting for a sign that you're allowed to rest, to reclaim your pace, to rebuild your health like it matters, this is it. You don't need to suffer to be worthy. You don't need to break to be reborn. You are not behind. You are not too late. You're right on time for the revolution that starts within. You were never meant to carry so much. Not in silence, not alone, and certainly not while being applauded for falling apart gracefully. Burnout is not a personal failure. It's not a lack of grit. It's the body's final plea for balance in a world that profits from imbalance. And if this video spoke to something you couldn't name, that tightness in your chest, that fog behind your eyes, that ache in your bones that rest never seems to cure, then hear this. You're not broken. You've just been surviving on systems that were never built for your humanity. But now, you know. You see the cracks. You feel the weight that no one else could name for you. And from here, it's not about flipping your life upside down overnight. It's about small decisions, clear boundaries, one breath at a time, one no at a time, one radical act of self-respect at a time. Because this quiet revolution doesn't need noise to change everything. If this resonated, let it echo forward. Hit the like button, not for the algorithm, but for yourself. Comment below, I'm choosing recovery, so others know they're not alone. Subscribe if you're done performing survival. Here, we don't reward collapse. We rebuild from clarity, from stillness, from truth. And if someone in your life is silently collapsing behind their smile, share this with them. Burnout is not a badge, it's a signal. And now that you've heard it, you don't have to ignore it anymore. We're rewriting what strength looks like, and it starts with you.